Hey everyone, welcome to the Acrobatic Arts podcast. I'm Lauren, and I will be interviewing some of the top leaders and innovators from the dance and acrobatic industry. If you are a teacher, performer, student, or a lifelong learner like myself, you are sure to find these episodes intriguing and full of inspiration. Acrobatic Arts is passionate about providing current and relevant information for everyone. So please, sit back and enjoy as we share our passion with you and the world. Today we are thrilled to have a very special guest, Lauren Ritchie, a renowned mental skills educator, podcast host, and dance expert. Lauren's journey from competitive dancer to mental performance specialist has provided her with invaluable insights on resilience, confidence, and building sustainable success in the world of dance and acrobatics. Let's get started. Lauren Ritchie, welcome to the Acrobatic Arts podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited for this conversation.
Lauren, for our listeners who might be meeting you for the first time, could you share a bit about your background and how you found your way into the world of dance?
Sure. I was a competitive dancer my whole life. I had a older sister who was 3 years older. So right from when I was a baby, I was in the studio environment. And some of my best childhood memories were standing in the doorway, looking at the senior dancers in jazz class, and just really getting consumed with everything and all of the joy and all of the creativity and all of the expression that comes with dance at a young age. So I was a competitive dancer my whole life, and particularly once I turned 11, 12, 13, I really loved training intensely. And competitions looked different back then, but there was definitely that competitive bug, that internal driver. And by the time I got to high school, I was doing really well. And when you do really well, I've learned people ask, what are you doing after high school? Are you going to keep dancing? And so around high school, I started to set my eyes on what would be possible to continue to dance. And I'm going to age myself, but there was no internet. And really all you could do was look to the people in your studio and say sort of like, what are they doing? And my older sister had taken a contract with a cruise ship. And so we went out and visited her. And I was like, well, this seems like a pretty good gig, traveling the world, getting paid, still dancing. So that was sort of my relationship and my journey with dance. And it's a complicated one, as we'll probably learn and explore, because that first contract went so poorly for so many reasons. And I had mismanaged sort of understanding and expectations that fundamentally shaped what I do and how I do it now. But that was how I started, and I still love competitive environments. I still find that there are great benefits to putting yourself in high stress environments, to learning how to work as both an individual and as a team. And yeah, some of my life's best friends and memories and moments of realizing potential were all through the lens of dance.
Now, I've listened to your podcast and I think I know what you're talking about with the cruise ship because you did an episode where you went in depth on that. And you've had such a diverse career from being a highly competitive dancer to a podcast host and now a mental skills trainer. What inspired you to transition from performing to focusing on the mental and emotional aspects of dance training?
This is where it gets interesting. It was like plot twist after plot twist because I took that first contract, and let me be so clear, it was a rarity. It was literally the first audition that I had submitted for. Again, I'm going to age myself, but it was a VHS tape. And you hear all the time, like, dance is just rejection. And once you get into the professional world, it's all no's. And so I came from like a very winning competitive career, submitted my audition and was like, hey, here we go. I do say I wish I had more rejection and more redirection, but that was not the journey. I got the first audition, I went. And what I realized very quickly was that the competitive environment does not mirror the professional environment. And so I had spent years and years and years really basing my self-worth and so much of my artistry and my performance around external validation. And this understanding that the physicality of what I was doing and like pushing to jump higher than the boys in the class and like just like fighting for your life for those pirouettes and fouette sequences, that was not the environment that I was stepping into as a professional. And so there was this weird blend of having an athletic identity crisis, finding myself in a dance environment with a completely different values system. And then there was other recipes in there, or I should say ingredients in that recipe. It was at the time of 9/11 and we were doing international travels. When I got onto the ship, the boat rocked and this 30-40 foot ladder fell on my head and it like sliced the back of my head. I fell downstairs. I had sliced an artery. Like there was all like, it was like head trauma. There was all this stuff that was also happening. But basically, what happened in those first few months of my contract was like I lost all sense of stability, all sense of normalcy and community. Again, this was before smartphones and internet. So when you were pushed out on a ship in the ocean, like you were removed from your social support. So I can look back now at this and see how I got there, but by the time I came off of my contract, I was unrecognizable physically, mentally, emotionally. And it was so jarring because physically you can still dance and artistically, creatively, like nobody can ever take that creative spirit and the artistry from you. And yet I imploded and I couldn't figure out where I went wrong and why this happened and how I could go from like 10 out of 10 confidence to absolutely none. And when I say none, I mean on the spectrum of the mental health continuum, like I was in the red. We had severe anxiety and depression and just like the trauma of the traumas. And that was in a very short period of time. And so a lot of these mental skills became me search research, where I started to pursue and get really, really curious around how you could be a top performing athlete and crumble and literally disintegrate, mind, body, soul, all of it. And so I had to do my own mental skills work. We didn't have that language. Sports psychology and this kind of support was non-existent. So it was definitely a tip of the arrow type learning. And and then from there, I was swept into a dance studio to teach and choreograph. And I had a beautiful teaching mentor who I give so much credit to for me falling in love with the art and the craft of teaching. But what I found is that as I was teaching and doing my own mental skills work, there was this incredible opportunity to give the kids the tools and to have these conversations and to sort of create a more expansive definition of success and process and approach that was happening in real time. And so I started to integrate these mental skills in straight through the coaching model and teaching mentality, that sort of art and science of who are these kids, what level are they at, what are these team dynamics. And as I started to do that, I found that there was sort of these invisible markers of growth and risk taking and courage and confidence that was beyond just any step or skill. So I ended up going back and getting my master's in education in coaching studies with a focus on mental skills training for dancers. Because I mean, I love and adore all my sports psychology friends. I admire them so much, but I did find that I would bring in sports psychologists to work with the dancers because I obviously saw such value in it, but they would leave. And so much of the responsibility was on the teacher to not only maintain the tools that the sports psych offered, but really it became more and more clear just how important the teacher's role is in creating sort of these resilient and motivational climates, and how impactful it is that we as the teachers and the leaders and the adults in the space frame and structure and use language that supports this kind of growth, mental, emotional, physical, and not just outcome technical based evaluations and celebrations. So that is how it became my work. And it was really a bit cart before the horse because I saw the proof and I saw how much it helped me. I was seeing how much it was helping the kids. So I was like, let's go back and get the research. Let's go back, get some of these credentials. Let's understand this even deeper. And that really was it. I mean, even the podcast, when you listen to the first few seasons, I was asking with a lot of curiosity about people's journeys in the dance industry that were sustainable, that were healthy, that they had like a great relationship or at least a better resilience around rejection. A lot of the start of the podcast was kind of this little voice in me going like, where did I go wrong and how did this happen? And what you notice as the podcast gets older, we finished wrapping season 6, and I think I'm at like 165 episodes or around there. What you'll notice is that even my questions and the conversations start to shift because I have a better understanding of the mental skills that were lacking in my training. And it is no disrespect to my teacher. These conversations and these tools were not accessible or really, really promoted or prioritized. But you'll hear it throughout the podcast, just how much more the tools become part of these conversations. And one of the coolest things about the dance podcast is it is now integrated into pre-professional curriculums. So the intensive training program at Harbor Dance Center uses podcast episodes and then has full reflection questions. And it's like part of their curriculum because it is such an important part that we are learning from each other, that we are getting these skills in this language, and we're better able to support ourselves and others.
Lauren, I did not know that about the dance podcast. And, I myself as a teacher, one episode that really comes to mind, I think it was episode 100 with Stacy Tukey, and she talked about she had an injury and how she recovered from that. And at the time, I had a student going through that. And so I said, you should really listen to this podcast because we use the tools that we have. So thank you so much for all the work you've done. And you've really learned from being a dancer in the situation and then from helping dancers in these situations. So you've really sort of done all the work. And I just think it's so wonderful.
Thank you. And I love that you've brought up Stacy because she's another one with her bridge program. She has created an entire pre-professional transitional program based on everything that we're talking about because our generation was just missing some of the tools. And now that we have it, it's like all we want to do is create the environments where others can thrive and use the tools that we didn't have.
And now you're creating several programs and exercises that are dedicated to mental health and fitness for dancers. And for our audience of acro teachers and studio owners, what are some core principles or techniques that you emphasize in your mental skills training programs?
Yeah. The teacher programs are some of my favorite, obviously, because the art and craft of coaching and teaching is what fills me with the most joy. And it's essentially been such a motivator and a compass and a curiosity for my life. We always start with this idea of as the leader in the room, not just the teacher here to share information and like show you how to do a bridge. We really are the adults and the leaders of the space where so many kids are doing remarkable things that also include a sense of fear and courage and bravery and curiosity. So with the teacher programs that I've created, we do a leadership module where we're looking at how we want to lead, how our tone, our language, our actions, our intentions, our priorities are all going to shape the environments in which we're inviting these kids in. Things like mental resilience, motivation, confidence, grit, growth mindset, all of these modules are essentially offering us different tools and access points at not only how we can teach the kids with more efficiency and clarity, but also really start to highlight the developmental stages that we work with and the different approaches that might be best suited for the different types of kids that we are going to be working with. When we work with such a broad level and broad age range, it requires us to really know the different brain stages and developmental stages and learning differences that inevitably are in our studio space. So one of the things that really prompted me to dive deeper into the craft of teaching is recognizing that yelling something louder doesn't doesn't make the feedback better or stick, that there's actually skill acquisition and just a ton of research on feedback that we can use to our advantage. So when I do the workshop and the mental skills work with kids, we are talking about growth mindset. We are talking about resilience. We are almost always talking about this sense of confidence because so many kids desire more of it. We talk about how to use imagery, how emotional regulation or arousal regulation is going to be a part of our training. This idea that we shouldn't have performance anxiety or that we're always going to be calm or being calm would be better for our performance. These are myths that we want to better understand and be more educated about, because we are going to be nervous. When you're entering your acro exam, you're nervous because you care. You're nervous because you've put a ton of work into this and there's levels of uncertainty. And it doesn't matter whether you're at school, whether you're in soccer, whether you are baking a cake, like anytime you're doing something that requires skill that you've put a lot of heart and effort into, yeah, your arousal will change. We just don't want the volume to go so loud that it inhibits everything that we have worked for. But we talk a lot about that with the dancers, and I do parent sessions. I think it's really important to include the parents in these conversations. If they're not a past acrobat or dancer, there's a gap in knowledge. There's probably a gap in understanding of how a very subjectively adjudicated art form is being measured and evaluated. And also, like, we're trying to compete as a sport. And that's gonna offer confusion for sometimes for the dance teachers and the parents, right? Like every competition you go to is going to have a different rubric, a different value system, a different scale. And we want to empower the parents because they are fundamental in their child's development and how we are working together as a community to support their growth in this thing that they love so much. So for me, it is always this beautiful blend of teacher and coach education, parent education, and student education. And if we can work all three, we'll have that beautiful crossover and consistency of language. And hopefully, I'm planting the seeds of both curiosity and connection.
Do you have any particular success stories or examples where you've seen that mental skills training has made a significant impact on a dancer's performance or mindset?
It happens daily, and I am very grateful for that because mental skills work is invisible. That was a really tricky thing for me and can be a tricky thing when parents and coaches and teachers are all talking about these invisible skills that we know are actually the transferable skills through life. But as a dance teacher, it is very satisfying to say straighten your arm and to see the energy shoot through the fingers and that elbow lift up and you're like, yes, they heard me. But when we're talking about some of the things like confidence and bravery and courage and risk taking in your artistry, it's harder to measure. And yet, I've had people be very generous and share with me how much it's impacted them. So, for example, last week I was talking to a dance teacher who took my course, who also is a dance mom and has a young dancer moving through the levels. And her daughter didn't move with some of her friends this year when it came to placements. And she said, I wouldn't have had the words or been able to support my daughter and myself had I not taken your course, because we have a better understanding of growth and growth mindset and how to speak about some of those things. And then I get an email from a studio who I shared with them. I go in and do these workshops and I plant a lot of seeds in parent, teacher, and dancer communities. But when I leave, it's tricky because I want to make sure it's still being nurtured and watered and that this is growing. And so they sent me an email saying that this was the best competition season they've had, particularly with their parents. And that was such a huge win because it was tricky to navigate these really competitive individuals, and parents have competitive spirits too, right? And so we're all trying to navigate that. So that email meant a lot to me because not only were the seeds planted, but that studio and those studio directors and those studio leaders continued the work and continued to water it. And so that's where it's like such a beautiful blend of everybody getting on the same page and using the tools. One of my biggest markers that I quietly held as a moment of success as a teacher was that I started working with a group of dancers who had the desire to be more competitive, and they had the aspirations of like, well, what could be possible? And I felt really, really proud of them and the work when I saw them going to auditions. And it's not that they thought that they were going to nail it or get scholarships or definitely be accepted. It was that they had the confidence to enter that space and they had a belief in their worthiness to be there. And it was this beautiful moment because confidence isn't just about smiling bigger or being sharper or faking it till you make it. It was this beautiful example. And there were particularly that season, there were so many kids who were going after things. They were trying things. You could see them pushing themselves in classes. You knew it was the edge of their comfort zone and they were going for it. And to me, it was just that like deep exhale that it's working. It's working. So there's a few examples, but often it does require people to share with me what their internal experience has been. Or like yesterday, I was helping a dancer work through, she's heading to one of the really big national competitions in a couple weeks. And we were just working through a lot of imagery moments. And she shared with me at the end of the call what was impactful and what she wants to keep practicing and growing. And so that to me is just knowing that I've given her another tool and she feels excited to use it and empowered by it. This is not quick fix, magical key work. When I talk to the dancers and the teachers and the parents, we have to think about what does it take to develop a physical skill? Look at a plie. Look at a simple bridge, right? How often do you have to practice that to feel a sense of strength, momentum, and confidence in the skill? We are plieing every day, hundreds of times a day. If plie is to bend, think of how many times you are bending and pushing. It's hundreds, it's thousands. By the time you're my age, it's probably like millions. Mental skills require the same consistency and prioritization and respect that a physical skill does. And so to me, knowing that I can share that with a dancer and they feel empowered to take it and run with it, or that that tool reminds them of all the work that they have done and all of the resources they have within themselves to go for it, it's beautiful. And I feel so grateful that I get to have those moments with the dancers and the teachers and the parents.
I'm guessing that through the years, you've seen, obviously, you mentioned the successes, but you've probably also seen a lot of common pitfalls that the young dancers fall into. Could you let us know what some of them are and how can they avoid them?
Oh, yes. I don't think anyone will be surprised by this answer. And I think that it's well beyond the dancers. Comparison is one of the killers when it comes to us focusing on our personal development, our personal skills, our growth, our artistry. Dancers are looking side to side, and of course we always were. I mean, we have the mirror in front of us. There was a tendency to look to the person who's in front of you at the bar, and that's not a inherently bad thing. We can actually use each other as inspiration. But what I'm noticing is that because of some of the online platforms and the overabundance of dance that we get in our lives now, which is both beautiful and overwhelming, comparison continues to be a strong distraction from each individual's growth and progress. And I have to catch myself doing it as a choreographer or as a teacher who is always trying to activate and enhance whatever this dancer's is potential. And we can all fall into comparison. I mean, parents are often looking at who else is in the category or what's being done down in the States versus up in Canada. So we're getting a lot of information about other people's training and other people's journeys, where the magic really does exist when you can be a little bit of a racehorse, putting your blinders on and coming back to what is your intention and why are you dancing? And what would personal success or growth look like in your meat suit or within your artistry? I don't have a flexible back. Since the day I popped out and started to walk on earth, like I remember in the kitchen as really, really young kids, my sister could touch her toes to the top of her head. And I couldn't. Like my spine naturally was more limited. And if I spent all my days sad about not having an arabesque like that dancer or not being able to do that trick, I would be very distracted and also focusing only on my limitations and my lack rather than finding the strengths or celebrating the really small wins. I celebrated a millimeter, a centimeter in my arabesque, not because my arabesque was flying over 90, but because for me, I was squeezing every inch out of that mobility. So that deserves a win. And I also have so many other strengths and an artistic heart and an artistic performance that other people don't have or don't get. So comparison would be a big one. I think, like I had said earlier, this idea that you can do one workshop on mental skills and like thumbs up, everything's better, or like, okay, I got the skills, I'm good. So consistency might be one of those obstacles or those sort of traps that we trip on, and probably focusing on only the outcome or outcome goals. So when we look at a goal setting approach, to include process goals, progress goals, I mean, I'm very hesitant with even taking much time with outcome goals because in our community, that idea of I want to win that title, I want, this mark, it is not in your control. And there are so many external factors. I am all about a dream, a wish, a North Star to run towards. I am somebody who does very good with looking at what other people are achieving and seeing it as inspiration, not intimidation. Like when another teacher is like killing it or a choreographer does like brilliant work, all it does is stir things in me to be like, well, then if that's possible, like what's possible within me? But so much of our world right now is solely focused on the highlight reel and the end results and the outcome goals. But the magic is in the process and the progress of you comparing yourself to you. So it kind of ties in with a little bit of the comparison, but I do see that when we get too fixated on titles, end results, programs that we feel we have to get into in order to be successful, most dancers will feel a sense of suffering.
Lauren, before we wrap up, I want to make sure I touch on your podcast. We already have a little bit, but I would have to say that the Dance Podcast is a fantastic resource and probably one of the best in our field. With all of your accomplishments, I'm interested on how you continue to challenge yourself and stay motivated.
I imagine it's pretty clear from this conversation of how much I love the art and craft of teaching and integrating the mental, physical, emotional pieces of what we do. I find myself in communities where I'm speaking to peers and other professionals, and whether that is master teachers and coaches. This morning, I was talking to somebody who has their PhD in mental skills within the music community and sort of these royal conservatories of music. And I just find that in every conversation, if you enter it with curiosity, there's just this abundance of inspiration and what I call breadcrumbs of curiosity. So much of what my career is, and probably my choreography, and maybe even my life, is just when something's interesting, I want to follow it. I want to see where it goes. And maybe it won't go anywhere, or maybe I'll figure out, oh, hey, I actually don't like that, or oh, it's not what I thought it was. But my best friend actually made me a shirt that said breadcrumbs of curiosity, because it really has been my approach to so much of what I do. And I find that there is truth in you will be the average of the people that you spend the most time with. And I don't think that's even just physical time. I listen to a ton of podcasts. I want to listen to a variety of sports psychologists and coaches and philosophers. And so I'm heavy on podcasts. I'm heavy on books. I enter many spaces with just a sense of wonder and a priority of connection. I did some work early in my me search research years where, rather than looking at goals, we were focusing on feeling based goals. Because often when you set a goal, you're associating that you're going to feel a certain way when you get it. And so it's like, let's actually talk about what is that feeling that you're desiring. And for me, it's always been connection. And that's connection to self, connection to others, connection to the work, connection to the world. And so that is how I continue to get inspired, is just through conversations like this and communities like this. And so I'm very, very grateful to be a part of it.
And finally, for those who want to learn more about your work and get involved with your programs, where can they find out more information?
The two best areas would be my website, which is withlauren.ca, and then my Instagram, which is Lauren_M_Ritchie. And I use Instagram as a bit of an educational platform, and I'll share a lot of things that inspire me. I have tried to limit my social media activity just because, again, I am mindful of where my time goes, but I have been so overwhelmed with the amount of connection and collaboration on Instagram that I choose to keep showing up on that platform with that intention.
Lauren, your dedication to helping everyone reach their full potential is truly something to be admired. Thank you so much for sharing your inspiring insights and passion with us today.
Thank you. And just again, very grateful to be here and the opportunity to connect.
A big thank you to our guest, Lauren Ritchie, for sharing her wisdom and expertise on mental performance and resilience. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, share it with your fellow performers and coaches, and be sure to follow us on social media. We hope that you are super excited to apply what you've learned today. Keep striving, keep growing, and remember, true success comes from the inside out. Thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great day.